And the way that the NWS has decided to deal with these catastrophic events is much the same way that the government deals with foreign affairs, and that is to downplay it in the sight of the public to reduce the panic level. And one of the ways they do this is by giving these storms friendly names like Katrina or Rita or Charlie. In fact, I think there was one recently named Francis. I mean, seriously, think about it. Everybody run for your lives because here comes Francis. Everybody take cover because here comes Charlie. Listen, when I think about Charlie, I think of about a boy I went to school with. And although he had a big mouth and an attitude to match, he weighed about 90 pounds soaking wet with gravel in his pockets. You could dress him up on Halloween by putting a nickel on top of his head and sending him out as a nail. Wasn't nobody scared of no Charlie. But listen, if you want to really get the public's attention, I think they ought to identify that thing for what it is. I think they ought to call it Hurricane Destructicon. Can you imagine Jim Cantori on the Weather Channel? Hurricane Destructicon will be making landfall in 2 hours and 45 minutes. All residents of Charlotte County are encouraged to evacuate at this time. Listen, they wouldn't be begging folks to evacuate. There would be a mass exodus. There wouldn't be none of this, I'm going to ride out the storm. You'd be getting your mama, your grandmama, and big mama for that matter, and Aunt Lucy and Maybelle, and saying, I'm getting myself up out of here because Destructicon's coming and I'm not going to hang around this place. And as it is in the natural, so it is in the supernatural. Storm clouds are gathering under friendly names like Islam. Storm clouds are gathering under the friendly name of same-sex marriage. Storm clouds are gathering under the friendly name of pro-choice. Clouds called methadone clinics. Clouds called state-run lotteries. The enemy is bringing the conditions together. He is aligning the elements, as innocent as they may seem, to converge in preparation for his most perfect attack. Paul said, for we are not ignorant of Satan's devices. We understand that this attack is too subtle and sinister to be man-made, but it must be and is the carefully calculated attack of the enemy. And so something is beginning to happen as the storm begins to rage. People are flocking to the church. I'll never forget in the days following Hurricane Katrina, laying on my couch on that Sunday night, watching this hurricane get ready to hit, and I had no idea how it was going to change my life in the next 48 hours. Our church was in DeSoto County. It was a Tennessee church right over the state line, but it was in DeSoto County, Mississippi, which was the first county that wasn't directly affected by the storm. And I'll never forget getting a call from someone from our church that said, Pastor, have you been outside? I said, I haven't. They said, go outside. Abigail and I got in the car, we drove down the road, and I have never seen anything like it. Our county, DeSoto County, our city, South Haven, overnight turned into a third world country packed with refugees. They called and they said, Pastor, they're in the parking lot of the church sleeping out of their cars. And so what we decided to do is we shut down the entire operation, our large facility. It's a $4 million facility that God had blessed us with. We shut down the entire operation and opened up an emergency shelter for hurricane victims. Trinity Baptist did the same. The Goodman Oaks Methodist Church did the same. We literally had hundreds upon hundreds of refugees coming through our churches. And I'll never forget getting a phone call from the director of FEMA one day for that region. He said, Pastor, could we come out and meet with you about your shelter? And I said, absolutely. So the director of FEMA came out and they said, we really appreciate what the church is doing. But as you know, Congress has just allocated millions of dollars. And the only way for us to get this financial aid is if these people are in our shelters. The first one is at Walmart and the Red Cross is set up. The other one is at the YMCA and the Red Cross is set up there. Could you kindly shut down your shelter and send the people our way? Well, obviously, we decided that we weren't going to do that. And 2 days later, when the First Lady, Laura Bush, came to town to see the refugees, she didn't get to go to the YMCA, but she had to come to the church to see them. And the reason that they were coming to the church, because it was the time of the storm. They weren't running to the YMCA, even though the Red Cross was at the YMCA. They weren't going to Walmart, even though the Red Cross was at Walmart, but they were running to the church. And the reason they were running to the church is because there is a resident anointing in the church that cannot be found anywhere else. Isaiah declared that in that day, his burden shall be taken off of thy shoulders and his yoke from off of thy neck, and every yoke shall be broken because of the the gospel. Let the rain fall, but preach the gospel. Let the thunder roll, but preach the gospel. Let Islam threaten the world, but preach the gospel. Let Al-Qaeda infiltrate,